Now the reason why that is just really helpful to us, whoops, I'm just going to go back over here and hit escape, toggle, box toggle. You can see that you still have the ability to edit your geometry. You can, for instance, translate faces. So I'm going to take, for instance, these faces here. I'm just holding down Shift, and I'll move these guys up. Oops, sorry. You don't want all of those. Right, and you can see that you can start to modulate the geometry quite easily. We go down, you can see, right, the effect here. And if I go back to my smooth mode, you can see that I get a nice continuous smooth surface. Right, so it's really easy to get then from that really simple primitive, right, to something which is much smoother and seemingly much more complex. Now, back at the extrude mode, you can see that you can switch to edges if you'd like and begin to extrude these out again. But in doing so, you'll see that it's going to kind of affect the geometry. So these moves, just because you can extrude in the way that we were working before, it doesn't mean that you can just do that and everything's going to keep smoothing. And we'll look at why that is as we go along. But the basic premise is being able to understand that from that simple primitive, using something as simple as extrude, you're able to get to something much smoother. Using edit mode, you can select edges, for instance. And by moving those edges, right, you can see that you get to a much smoother piece of geometry. Now, obviously, the more edges you have, when you move that up, that's going to ultimately affect the form more or less. Right, so if you have, for instance, a lot more faces, then you can obviously start to affect the geometry much more locally. So edit mode. Edit mode is a collection of tools that are optimized for quickly editing T-Splines objects. And you turn it on and off using the little on-off button that we were just looking at. It's a green icon. And T-Splines objects can be edited using either faces, edges, or vertices. Those are referred to as vertex grips. You can see here the kind of different things that you would be able to edit with, edges, faces, and vertices. And there is a special kind of drag mode that you can kind of like click between that will change whether or not it's constrained to a construction plane or the world or to normal to the surface. So we'll definitely take a look at that as we go. But again, the main thing to recognize is that primitive piece of geometry really comes alive through adding in either more faces, as we did, extruding, or modulating the geometry by using its grips, either face, edge, or vertex. So let's just take a quick second, and I'm going to go right back to box mode. So I have my little element right here. And you'll notice that if we take this object, and let's just copy, we'll just copy them from here to here, that this isn't aligning, right? So one of the nice things about T-Splines is that in Rhino, for instance, you can use, I don't know, transform, and you can mirror a piece of geometry, right, which we can see right here. You can mirror it like so, right? And continue to make more expansive surfaces, right? Just using something like a transform of mirror, for instance, from Rhino's tool set. Now, these objects together will not join and operate as one continuous surface yet, but we will look at how to make that happen. But you can see that they do still maintain their ability to smooth. Now, when I separate these, it might be a little bit easier to kind of see what's going on. We'll just go right back to our smooth toggle, and you'll see that they each will be able to still go back to smooth. And we'll be looking at how to join everything and make it one continuous surface in a later exercise. Now, the manipulators that we're using, whenever we start to modify the control groups of an object, give you access to quick operations like translate, rotate, and scale. Now, we've really only been using the translate manipulator, although we use the disks to be able to almost like pan the geometry constrained to a plane. We mentioned that if you double-click an axis, that'll give you the ability to enter in an exact distance. But there are, for instance, other types of manipulators that you can use. So I'm just going to delete these guys and zoom in here. Now, because I'm going to be working with a manipulator and I want to understand a little bit better what's going on, I'll just smooth toggle back. And if I go to edit mode, we were looking at how you can edit at the object, the face, edge, or vertex, and we're doing that with the translate. But if you notice, there's also a manipulator for rotate. And if I click on rotate and I select, for instance, a face, I can, if I'd like, rotate the face. Right? So that's really cool, really big help. And if I went to scale, I could also scale the face. If I wanted to scale it up only in one direction or scale it way down. Right. If I want to make it undercut or expose it a little bit more. Right. So combining the translate, the scale, and the rotate allows you to very quickly start to manipulate the character of the geometry that you're working with. So again, from that simple primitive, moving the faces up, you can start to develop a simple component or a simple piece of T-spline geometry, which, if you were to say copy it over or mirror it over, can begin to act as a continuous T-spline surface. Now, the primitive here of working with a plane, for instance, if we just copy this over, you'll notice sometimes you may want to use edit mode, and I don't know, let's try something like select multiple edges. But if you wanted to move all of those edges out at the same time, you might not use the move or translate manipulator, and instead you'd use something like scale. Right? But if you notice, when I use scale, it's actually scaling them relative to the world. In this case, it's actually to the construction plane. And so in the drag mode, this is that last setting that I was mentioning here to the right, you have the ability to modify which way that manipulator is oriented, or what it's using as its kind of basis for transformation. In this case, the construction plane, the world, or in this case, normal, right, with the U. So if I were to take this guy and say if I translate these objects now, you'll see that now they're actually pushing out or pulling in, right? So that's something that's going to take a little bit of time getting used to, but it just takes a little bit of practice. And with this guy selected, modifying to T-spline, you'll see that we have a little bit of funky business going on right here. Switching to our extrude mode for faces. And converting to smooth again, right, we can see that our T-spline object smooths out nicely. So that ability to extrude the faces in is really going to be our good friend as we're modeling today. Keep in mind that translating a face, right, translating an edge, right, or translating vertices will ultimately have a very different effect on the geometry. So one more time, if I go all the way back to here, from a plane back at edit mode, you have the option to work with objects, faces, edges, or vertices. If I were to select edges, for instance, if I move them, you can see that this is relative to the world. So, I always want to take a look at my drag mode, which you can see here, and ensure that I'm using the correct drag mode. In this case, I want to be using the drag mode for U, which will allow me to begin to scale this in or out. Now, with that selected as such, you want to go over here to extrude faces. We're just going to extrude all of our faces in, and I'm using the scale modifier. So now with that scale modifier selected, my drag mode back to world allows me to scale these guys in. And if you notice as that that drag mode, as I'm scaling in, it shows you where the faces were and where they ended up. So now I'm back at my smooth mode, and I have this smooth now. And again, just repeating exactly what we just did, if we were to, for instance, move these edges, you can see that it's going to allow you to modulate the edge, the face, for instance, etc. Okay, so that's really the premise behind working with something as simple as a plane like this, is that you can very quickly get to more organic form by using the trick that we were just showing you, the extrude edge, and then manipulating the grips. Now, before we get too far along, we are going to switch over to looking at how you can create T-splines from lines. And I wanted to show you all that the files, although we're not going to really be opening the files that we distributed to you guys, we're going to build everything from scratch, we did include each one incrementally labeled so that you can see how we get from the object here, vertex, edge, face, for instance, and what was shown in the slide, right? So I just wanted to remind everyone that these files are here and available for you after the webinar to go through and review. So this file that we're going to go through next is outlined in its entirety here for you as well. I prefer to just start from scratch every time so that we can kind of work through it together. Now,